We are live now. Okay. Good day to all. Welcome you all to Saveetha International Architecture Talk Series conducted by Saveetha College of Architecture and Design, Saveetha Institute of Medical and Technical Sciences. Talk will be the fifth talk of the series. I am Dr. Deepak, Associate Dean International Affairs, Saveetha School of Engineering, Saveetha Institute of Medical and Technical Sciences. At the outset, I extend my sincere thanks to our Honorable Chancellor, Sir. And I also extend my sincere thanks to our Director Madam for Madam's continuous guidance and support. Today we have with us Ms. Leanda French from Teesside University, UK to deliver talk in our Saveetha Architecture Talk series. Teesside University and SIMATS have signed MOU already, and many academic and research collaborations are being carried out. I'm sure today's talk will open up new frontiers in the field of architecture and design. Now I invite Professor Balsavar, Dean, Saveetha College of Architecture and Design, to give his welcome address. Over to you, sir. Sir? Oh, okay. You can, now it is over, sir. Like we can continue? Okay. 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 Architect Sandhya, can you able to introduce Ms. Leanda French? Can you please go ahead and introduce, please? Yeah.
Yes, sure, sir. So myself, Assistant Professor Sandhya from SCAT. I'm happy to introduce Ms. Leanda French. Ms. Leanda French is a designer who trained in London at Middlesex University, and she has graduated from the Royal College of Art in 1987. The majority of her subsequent career has been spent in education, teaching at both undergraduate and postgraduate level at universities in the northeast of England. She has worked for 27 years at Teesside University and is currently the program leader. Her main areas of interest are interior design, furniture design, and architecture, and she has led the courses at Teesside to become recognized by the Society of British and International Designers. These industry links have enabled the development of areas of specialism on the courses she runs in areas such as design for healthcare and well-being in work environments. Thank you very much for coming. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. It's wonderful to be invited to speak to you, and I'm very honoured that I can connect with colleagues and with international students at this very unusual and challenging time. However, I am able to speak to you this afternoon about something which I feel very passionate about, which is about health and well-being in work environments. I feel that I may well leave you with more questions than when we started, but that's good, because in the current situation and dealing with a global pandemic, we are having to rethink things, to rethink design, to rethink interiors, to rethink architecture. And we are going to have to be very agile in our responses to how we adapt to what is being referred to as the new normal. So normal life will be normal, but it'll be different to how we have all experienced things in the past. So as I say, there may be questions, and we will end up with some of those in my final slides, and I might leave you some food for thought. But for now, I'm going to share slide number 1, which illustrates rather an uninspiring office space. This is an image from what employees would experience in about the 1950s, and how happy we are that we are more well informed. The profession of design has developed and has improved the situation for people in their daily life at work. So thank goodness things have changed for the better. So we're going to be having a look today at where we work, how we experience work, and this idea that the landscape of the office has changed, but also will continue to have to change with COVID-19. I hope you find the illustrations that I've used inspiring. Quite often as students and even as academics, we don't often get inside to see some of the most stimulating environments that are out there, that are developing around the world in line with how we work. So we do have to use images and try and piece together the wonderful changing landscape. So we're going to have a look at some of the trends and the themes and the people who are influencing the design of work environments. And this idea that the office is open, fluid, and has been like that for recent years. We're seeing a new visual vocabulary. We see very startling and inspiring images of office spaces, and also the words that we use when we're speaking about offices and the design of offices. That visual and verbal vocabulary has also changed. The image that you see on the screen at the moment is of part of a Red Bull head office, and we will see a few more images of that particular office as we progress through the talk. These are some of the words that we use now, almost without thinking too much about the design of offices. Some of them are very new terminologies, and I just thought that I would list some of the key words there that we use when we're describing the design of offices, when we're thinking about offices, and quite often we use them very freely now. The idea of breakout, breaking away from your desk, movement around the office, different kinds of meetings. There isn't just one type of meeting room anymore. The idea that we can hot desk, perhaps have a space that we don't own all of the time, but we can drop in and drop out of. Obviously, the idea of a shared kitchen is becoming more and more prevalent. The idea of chilling out. Many of the images that I'm going to show you are from creative offices, and the expectation of long hours, working to deadlines, as I'm sure you're all used to now, being students of design. Quite often, the pressure towards the end is quite significant. So we see the development of chill out spaces for when we're doing late nights and early mornings. We have storage, quiet spaces, spaces where we might want to refresh, meet, connect, and also there may be spaces where we would continue our training and development. So that's a little bit about the verbal vocabulary. When we look at office design, we really need to look at the people who are leading the way. These offices that are breaking the mold, making us think about how we work and how we work differently. And we can learn a lot from looking at how a lot of these front runners are using their office spaces to facilitate happy employees. And again, we will talk about the idea and continue to reflect upon the idea of well-being, the fact that people have choice and can move around spaces, rather than the first image that we saw where people were rather tied to their desks. So here we see a wonderful image of almost interior pods within an open office, which take you away perhaps from your desktop machine and allow you to move, which aids in better physical health, and move and use laptops in different environments. And we're getting the stimulation from moving around the office, meeting people, but also the various different micro environments that we see stimulate our brain, our eyes, and hopefully make us feel very, very connected with where we work and who we work with. This is a key matter, that offices are reflecting the way that we want to work and the way that we can work, and professional spaces therefore have changed. As a general point, I would say open offices now, like the ones that we're looking at, are certainly softer in their interior space. And something that I want to mention here, and I probably will return to, is this idea that office spaces now and workplaces are reflecting a little bit of a home from home aesthetic. So we can begin to recognize things in a professional workspace which might have more usually we have thought of being home. So we see much more stimulating uses and applications of colour, of upholstered furniture, of softer items rather than hard desks all of the time. We see wonderful light and the use of particular illumination, which is very stimulating. And even on the right-hand image of the ones that you can see now, we even see something which we would consider to be a fire pit, something which makes our home spaces quite often feel and look very cosy. And we see it adapted here into a reception area. So it becomes part of the corporate welcome. Welcome to our offices. Look at us. Look at how forward-looking we are, and we're really happy to see you. We should all be informed. That's part of my job, even though I have been teaching in academica for a number of years. I still feel that a significant part of my job is to remain informed and up to date. Currently, at the moment, obviously, we're not all travelling or not able to travel easily, so we begin to rely on using different ways of finding out what's current and what's going on. And I hope that you all feel that that's an important part of your education too. So there are companies out there who become what we would call influencers, or perhaps early adopters of innovative ideas about the design of interior spaces. And we are really still learning about the ideas which relate to open offices. We know and feel that well-being is improved, where we see stimulating environments to work in, but actually really we're constantly reflecting upon that and researching the impacts. These front people like Google and the people who are the key influencers in the office design world will be the influencers, and we will all see this trickle down. We see influences moving down so that they become more accessible, and we see them used in accessible markets as we're learning. So even though we might not all be able to fund the exquisite offices that Google might fund, we can still use some of the principles in the way that we design perhaps smaller or slightly less funded offices. The next few slides, I just thought let's have a look at some of the people who are influencing and making us see different opportunities for the design of workspaces. The image that you will see on the slide at the moment is from Lego, a very innovative company, obviously, which you possibly all know, who devise the building toys for children, but also feel that their design offices for the adults who design the toys, that the adults should also have fun at work and feel inspired each day when they're at work. So we see ideas of humour and playfulness come through here. If you really feel brave enough, in this office you can take the slide, which offers a shortcut from one of the upper corridors, and you will land in a target down on the floor below you. And we will see some more images of the Lego offices as we progress. But I think it's important to indicate here how humour and making us smile at work is an important feature of design. We had to have Facebook in here. And I think, again, we are seeing very early adopters of this home from home aesthetic. So perhaps what we might be more comfortable looking at in domestic interiors is adapted and brought into the office. And again, it reflects that idea of a home from home. We also see in that image there some classic design being used too, and quite often we will see furniture that have been important in design history feature in office spaces. I mentioned Google earlier on, and there's no way that we could have a discussion like this without including Google in there. A very, very radical and innovative approach to designing interior spaces that support their staff. The image that's on the screen now is from one of the London offices, so we see some typical United Kingdom British icons in here. So we see the telephone booths, which are in the far left-hand corner. Again, they will be used not as traditionally that they would be used on street corners in the cities, but they're now used so that people can have a little bit of privacy if they need to have a mobile telephone call about work. You can pop into a London phone box. We also see the stripy cabins, again, are a recognisable element of some of the coastline in the UK, and are used quite often at the seaside and at the beach for people to get changed. So again, they have been brought and repurposed from their usual use into a brand new use, which I hope would make people smile. In the foreground here, we are seeing the evolution of a traditional high-backed chair, armchair. Again, looking at improving acoustic privacy, even though you're not private from your colleagues, but the use of this, the sort of wings at the side, is something that you will begin to see in some furniture now utilised in the office. So perhaps the research might tell us as we go along that stimulating workspaces can aid in the retention of staff. People feel that they want to stay. And also researchers are also looking at, do we see fewer cases of illness when people are able to work in an office where they feel that they are being supported and provided with wonderful access to stimulating environments. The next one is a Microsoft Office. You can see in the image again on the left, there's somebody who's perched with her laptop at a window space, maximising and making use of beautiful views and probably natural light coming in there too. Another innovative aspect of this space is what we can see on the right here near the striped flooring, the internal growing wall. So the use of biophilic design to enable staff in this office to feel some sort of connection with nature. And obviously we also know that the use of planting in interior spaces also can improve air quality. This one is an AOL office again, an open office, but with what I would describe as fluid boundaries. We see the glass offices where people are getting on with their work, perhaps individually or perhaps in meetings. But we also see the fact that people are allowed to use their lunch times and their breaks in different ways. So we see the use of, we can actually see somebody in using a drum kit in the rear of the picture, and we also see some people playing snooker or pool. And again, this sense of trust is given over to the employees. We trust that those two men playing pool will not play pool all day, but will also be very, very productive when they get back to their desks. So there's a lovely sense of openness here. There's a very, very strong visual connection between people. But we also have that sense of acoustic privacy where people can work in peace and quiet too. So these are open office principles, hopefully without compromising any of the staff productivity. We're returning now a little bit to Red Bull, where we see with the interior of their key offices that designers are trying to capture the dynamic image of the brand. Obviously, Red Bull started with energy drinks and now have Formula One teams, and they compete in kind of the trash car, the handmade car competitions. And part of that ethos, that energy, has to be captured and has been captured in the images that you were able to see. So the brand image, their energy and their values are used very positively as design features. The image that we see here is another image of one of the spaces in the Lego offices, and we see a much more casual approach to the idea of meetings. So we see people sat around a high bench on stools. This might be a 5-minute meeting. It could be a half an hour or longer meeting. But we also see some more integrated aspects of biophilic design here with planting. And we see people developing and getting on with their work. So there are some key design drivers which are listed here And if we just have a little look at each of those, interior design for office workspaces now is trying to accommodate flexible patterns of working. So, you know, people can use their lunch, come in late, start early, work later. So these flexible patterns of work are accommodating perhaps changes in their situations at home, and lots and lots of positives about flexible patterns of working, such as trying to reduce, you know, the idea and the notion of the rush hour. You know, that everybody's trying to get work trying to get to work for a 9 o'clock start, and has a not a very positive impact on human beings, or also on the city. So we're looking at accommodating. We're also trying to integrate mobile technologies. So we know that we can work on something as tiny as our smartphone now and still be a productive employee. We have the ability to move around the office more with laptops. So the integration of mobile technologies into the workspace, again, has allowed us to move, has allowed us to experience other areas of the office rather than, again, as I mentioned, being tied to a desk. We're also trying to nurture a collaborative and a team spirit. This is very important in how we work. The idea of collaborating with our team, and the fact that we may also want to do, we'd call some heads down work, and, you know, we want to get on with our work. But actually here we can see a perfect example of a heads up meeting where people are being very productive and hopefully very creative and discussing ideas away from perhaps their own single desk. All of these things go towards, we hope, fostering a community at work with an ethos that relates to the company, and that people feel that they are a really integrated part of where they work, and what they are all trying to achieve together as an output from that workspace. So if we have to try and integrate mobile technologies into the workplace, we need to do that, and we need to do that well. And it's had a knock-on effect. Again, here in the image, we see someone working with her feet up on her laptop, still being productive. But she has the opportunity to be able to work away from, perhaps from her key desk. So again, we see here this change, this evolution of the types of furniture spaces we will see in offices. So perhaps we need, and if we go down the bullet points, more comfortable seating, different kinds of seating. And what we see here is probably quite a short stay or on the move piece of furniture. We might need more charging stations around the environment that we're in. We're escaping from our desk, but we still have privacy. We have both acoustic privacy and physical privacy here, as we can see where appropriate in the image that we have. We even see that we can just scribble on the walls, and they will be able to be very, very easily cleaned later in the day. So this has led furniture designers who design for the office or design different kinds of furniture. Again, it's allowed people to explore perhaps this idea that furniture can be different now, and that you don't sit in one position, or you have a chair, which is the one that you can see here, which actually changes to allow somebody to sit in completely the opposite way than we would expect, and allow them to be able to use their laptop effectively. If we're trying to nurture collaborative and team spirits, we need different kinds of individual spaces too. The image that you see is, again, this idea of the creation of an internal pod within an open office. We see that in some offices, employees are allowed to bring their dogs to work. Having your dog or your pet is considered to be a significant stress reducer. But we also see beautiful, innovative use of materials here, which are not perceived as expensive materials at all in design. But we see the use of sterling board and polycarbonate plastic. But the rest of the office doesn't feel that it's a cheap solution. It's a reasonably priced material used in a very, very exquisite way. So those ideas of pods have led to things like little sort of breakout zones, crash rooms. If people do this serious, long, late into the night work, they can perhaps have a power nap. Quiet rooms. We see space flexibility. And we see different kinds of meeting rooms for different kinds of meeting functions. These things give people choice, and choice is good. If you walk into a restaurant, you would hope that you had a choice of where you wanted to sit. Similarly, with work, to have the choice of movement and where you want to work. It supports that good feeling at work and supports well-being and general health. So these types of images here are showing breakout spaces. In the left-hand image, we see some softer, padded meeting room spaces, which actually appear to be built into the architecture of the building. Sometimes these are referred to as railway carriage meeting spaces, probably only big enough for 1, 2, 3 people, but nevertheless are an environment that give you privacy if you need privacy, or give you the opportunity to have a meeting. And again, in that image, in front of the built-in railway carriage meeting spaces, we see furniture which we recognise much more from residential spaces. The corridor that you see on the right-hand side, again, has this softness, input of colour, textiles, things we might expect more to see in the home. But it's very much a chance to meet and to work informally. If you meet somebody, you could just sit down for 5 minutes and do some work there. So we see a lovely integration of bespoke furniture elements too. So the railway carriages in the left-hand side very much are bespoke and built into the architecture of the building. And the one on the right shows the contours which echo the shape along the corridor. Another type of meeting room quite often is referred to as a team room, and that's the image that is on the screen now. So this is a meeting space where there isn't really a table central. It's a meeting space where if you have to make notes, you make them on a notepad on your knee, but quite often this might just be a space where people go for perhaps a stimulating talk or perhaps a very brief meeting, and you can see that it's decked with a glazed door, which again mean that acoustically it would be private. Again, the material is a very sort of a usual form of plyboard used in an innovative way, with the idea of images and super graphics attached to the wall. This is another interesting chair by the designer Benjamin Hubert, who has again dealt with this idea that a chair now, perhaps in a workspace, there'll be areas and times where you just want to almost sort of hide. This picture is quite sort of wrap around, quite womb-like in a way, and someone could tuck up their knees and work away happily in a quiet space in an open office. So flexible patterns of work have been much more accommodated recently in office designs. And perhaps this is in response to the fact that the traditional idea of a 9 a.m. to a 5 p.m. job in an office perhaps is changing now. Working hours perhaps are no longer 9 to 5. But people choose perhaps to work earlier or work later in the day, and therefore they need to be refreshed. They need to have access to a kitchen or to a work or staff canteen to allow people to feel refreshed, to drink, to have their lunch, and to also be in quite an interesting and stimulating environment here. It isn't your normal form of kitchen. So if we're encouraging people perhaps to use cycles or find different ways into work, the daily commute can be made more bearable with flexible working hours. Many offices now will include bathrooms and showers, perhaps that weren't so common. So this is if you do cycle to work, you're able to change, be showered, park your bicycle somewhere safe, and be ready for the day ahead of you. The idea of freelancing, I mean, we use that word quite a lot, and I've mentioned the idea of hot desk as well. So these sort of principles really are where people might not have a desk which they call their own. So we're in the realm here of shared facilities. And again, this is being benefited by the fact that we have a laptop, we have a telephone, and we can move. So mobile technology has helped this idea that we can just drop in or pop in or spend a day somewhere without feeling that we have to have our own desk. And the images that you see are different freelance and hot desk approaches. Thinking about what is happening at the moment, you know, that we have the pandemic at the moment, and you know, this idea that we're trying to perhaps create bubbles. There may be ways that community desk spaces could do that, perhaps rather than using highly densely populated large office spaces. And so perhaps this idea of a drop-in or the flexibility in your working day would allow you perhaps to, what we're trying to do at the moment is perhaps not have high densities of people working together. So this might be a way that we can stretch. So it kind of made me think about the idea of dropping into an office, dropping onto a desk, dropping into a freelance space, because we all tend to do that. And as I say on that slide, how often have we all had work meetings in a convenient coffee shop? So the coffee shop in its way as well is becoming an extension of the flexibility of the space that we have. So hopefully this is something that is perhaps emerging trends at the moment that we're beginning to think about. So we tend to go back really to that very, very uninspiring, very black and white image that I showed you at the beginning. And, you know, in terms of the pictures and the imagery that we have seen, we have to reflect on all of those improvements, how designers have improved the ambience and the atmosphere of going to work, how office planning has changed so significantly, the materials that we have seen in the images that I've shown you, from soft textiles to upholstered chairs, to almost people sitting on the floor or on a stool. We've seen cheap materials used beautifully. You know, this influx and braveness and use of materials is something that we need to remember. We see acoustic improvements. We see much better lighting. I mean, in the image that we're currently looking at now, there isn't any specific task lighting. This is all overhead strip lighting, which again isn't good for general well-being and health. We've seen spaces that feel more decorated, and we've seen innovations in furniture. We've seen better building of communities and spaces which allow a much more flexible communication between staff than I'm sure the ladies here experienced when they will possibly have had a lunch break very strictly adhered to and back to the desk. So communication and that feeling of togetherness for a singular output is better. Moving and mobility and ergonomics, again, it's a little difficult to see the chairs. I think the chairs that they're sat on here are quite basic, probably very early office chairs. But again, we're much more aware now how important it is that our screen, our wrists are supported, our keypads are at an appropriate position, as well as being able to stand up, stretch our legs and move around a little bit, which is good for your circulation. So the little paragraph on the bottom, you know, there has been a seismic shift in the expectations of employees. People wouldn't really want to walk into an office today and be faced with necessarily what we're seeing on screen. And although I'm sort of giving this talk today about something that I have been very interested in past years, you know, things are shifting constantly at the moment, and things will continue to be changed in terms of the extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in now. So in terms of what we have said, we need to try and remember all of the positive elements which we've just seen and that we have learned as we've developed office spaces, and not forget them in line with what we're going to all have to try and adhere to at the moment, where our situation has been changed by the transition of germs. So we mustn't forget that. So my last few slides really relate to the shifting sand that we're on at the moment. We're going to have to be looking at retrofitting new adaptations into old offices, because the construction industry has been affected by the virus, and I doubt that we will be seeing new build offices which accommodate the needs in relation to to COVID now. So I think we're going to have to be having a look significantly at the idea of retrofitting, adjusting, and being agile with the spaces that we have. So there are going to be some new needs in office design. And we need to think about how the office landscape will respond to some of those needs. So social distancing will be something that's very important to consider when planning space. Hygiene, so the notion of regular hand wash and regular sanitization. We will maintain the community of employees, but to a degree at the moment, with home working and working out of the office, perhaps that sense of community has been a little bit eroded. I certainly miss my colleagues from Teesside University, even though we meet regularly. It's not the same as feeling some of those physical connections with your colleagues and peers. We need to continue to support mental and physical health, and perhaps think about the flexibility of both working at home and working in the office, but also the flexibility of working patterns. This I felt fitted in somewhere along the line, and we see the Villa Savoye, which was the beginning of the pure articulation of the idea of modern. So we see an image of the exterior, and I'm sure that you're all very, very familiar with this. So this is a period of time in the late 1920s where we were struggling with the notion of hygiene and germs, and that cities were quite sort of almost high risk areas for the transmission of germs. And we see how, in this image on the right, how Le Corbusier considered that, and actually placed a wash hand basin in the entry hall to the Villa Savoye. We don't often see too many images of this. We see images of the other areas of the Villa Savoye. But some of the underlying ideas of modernism, of access to fresh air, access to light, natural light, connections with nature, and the idea of hygiene, perhaps is something that might have been slightly forgotten about recently, but we're certainly going to remember that now. We might see a little more of this. So those internal pods, which are in the office, perhaps might gravitate into being located in different areas. So I thought I would show you some interesting office pods, which would be the type of thing which could be prefabricated away from site and transported to a site, to allow people perhaps to work effectively. Many of us are working in spare bedrooms, like me, but perhaps there might be a growth of this type of thing. I've picked, I think, are particularly stimulating, interesting ideas of how we could bring our work home with us, perhaps more efficiently. And I wondered if there would be something that we might call work away from work, rather than calling the office home away from home. And I think both of those things are possibly what I would like to leave you with at the moment. And hopefully the images and some of the things that we've thought about today might remain with you and help you to foresee your you know, how this might influence what you do as an architecture and as a design student going forward. And I wish you all the best. I hope you are all well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leanda. Now with us. So over to you, sir, for the discussion session. Yeah. Sir, we could not hear you, sir. I think still again it is not audible. Okay. Let me open the session for question and answer session. Maybe anybody in the audience would like to ask few questions with Ms. Leanda. Like, please go ahead and ask. Yeah. Yeah. I should say it was a really wonderful talk and very nicely articulated talk, Leanda. It was very good, and I'm sure our faculties and the students would have enjoyed a lot. Thank you very much for that.
That's all right.
Yeah. Let's open the session. Yeah. Architect Sandhya.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
I have one question. My
Yes.
question, yes, ma'am, I would like you to say about the ergonomics of office furniture a little bit more. Could you throw some light into that
Yes, of
aspect?
course.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
the ergonomics of the traditional office chair has improved in line with our greater understanding of, I suppose, the anthropology of the human being. So quite often ergonomic studies for offices are related to perhaps longer periods of being seated at a desk with a screen, considering the use of the arms and hands and wrists in particular, also the lower back, and making sure that that is supported, and also circulation, so the position of your feet. But in the open office, we saw, and in some of these creative offices, we saw many different forms of furniture, perhaps where the ergonomic consideration is different because you would spend less time sitting on there. And this is something which I think is probably currently being researched by someone at the moment, because it's probably something that there isn't a direct answer for, but we do know that office chairs, proper office chairs, well-designed ergonomic office chairs, which you would buy from an office supplier, have improved to be almost completely adjustable for each human being's personal ergonomics. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember in this when we talk about ergonomics. No two people are exactly the same. Longer legs, shorter bodies, wider hips, different shoulders, different arms. So the adjustability of a good office chair is really important to accommodate that. But the softer furniture, where we can sit with our knees up, or we can sit with our legs crossed, or we sit in a poor position, perhaps is something that we would look at. But I think we have to assume that people are not sitting there for a long working day. Is that okay?
Is it audible?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Is it audible now?
Yeah, yes, sir. It is audible. It is audible. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Leanda French, for the wonderful presentation. A wide range of insights, and there are a few questions which have come in from um, various participants here. I think one question is from Naveen. If Naveen is there, would Naveen like to speak it out? Naveen? Naveen, you're here in the group. Would you like to speak it
Hello.
out? Yeah, please, Naveen.
Yeah. Thank you,
Hello.
ma'am, for this wonderful conversation.
That's all right. You're welcome.
I'd like to ask about how smaller office spaces will transform from now on.
Oh, good question. Good question.
Thank you.
We're certainly seeing, well, in the UK, there's been a trend for smaller offices not to return to renting an office space. I think the realization that certain employees can be incredibly productive from home, which is what we've had to learn in this situation, has meant that certain offices have opted not to go back to their smaller office. And we are seeing this in the UK with things possibly like estate agents, house sales, solicitors. Certain office spaces are now becoming vacant. In terms of those that have to go back and need people to be in the office, I think we might see some rather ugly interventions made to try and separate people, either physically or separate them with barriers and boundaries. The industry that must have actually succeeded during the period of lockdown are those companies that make acrylic and plastics, because every store, every small office will now need to find a way of creating partitions between people so that you don't necessarily have to wear masks and visors all day long at work, which would be incredibly uncomfortable. And again, very, very bad for morale. So smaller offices, I think, are going to have to possibly do a quick fix so that people can go back to work. Hopefully, as we progress, either the quick fixes will be able to be removed if we are able to have a vaccine quickly, soon. If not, and if the search for the vaccine goes on longer, I think we'll be living with rather quick, instant fixes, either pulling desks apart where that's feasible, but also trying to create physical barriers. I hope it doesn't mean that the social spaces have to change too much. I think it probably will, though. I think kitchens will have to be policed completely differently or perhaps closed down. So it's hard to say, but I think at the moment, a little bit perhaps like we're seeing in retail, what we're seeing are quick fixes, short, quick answers that can be installed within a couple of hours to physically separate people. And also the absolute rush of hand sanitizers, which seem to be on every door, every corner, quite rightly. But again, those in themselves are not the most beautiful of objects. But thank you, Naveen. I
Thank
hope
you.
that answers.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you, Naveen. There's another question on there appears to be a kind of reaction to go back to the cubicle from the open office. Your thoughts and insights on that?
I think this again probably will happen. I mean, I think at the moment design is being driven by speed. We realise that people have been away from work for a long time, and so now there's a kind of a speed and an urgency to enable people to get back to a degree of normality. And perhaps the idea of pods and small spaces within a larger office might be the way forward. But I think part of it at the moment is about speed.
True. So I think it may move to, do you see a move to flexible, adaptable kind of spaces and divisions and partitions that may be more dynamic and keep moving?
Yes, I have one of my master's students here at Teesside has been looking at, those ideas of retrofitting, so working with the bare bones of a piece of architecture that we already have and how that might work. She's just been looking at how fresh air and the circulation of air could be more accommodated, which we all know is it's much better to be in moving fresh air than it is to be in somewhere which is an enclosed space. So I'm sure that some of the other bigger companies out there are looking at pods, both for the use internally and also perhaps like the garden pods that I showed you. And again, perhaps they might be able to respond quickly if they are built in a factory unit, for example, and delivered on the back of an articulated lorry, or perhaps in pieces for construction. These make wonderful student projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We look forward, in fact, if it's possible, we look forward between Teesside and Saveetha. We explore what's happening in India here, some very interesting examples which we would like to share with you, and maybe build this to a larger conversation, as it unfolds.
Yes.
And I think that would be a great platform to explore.
Yes.
There's one more question which has been texted to me. Which would you think would be affected more, the large office spaces or the smaller ones over the next year in terms of their way of functioning?
I think probably the smaller offices, where you have physical space in some of those larger offices, you've got more to work with, and also perhaps I'm kind of making an assumption that the smaller offices are less financially sound. That might be an assumption I'm making, but perhaps bigger spaces like Google and AOL and Facebook and Lego and all the ones that we have seen have more flexibility to be able to allow flexible working patterns. Perhaps the smaller office, there might be a smaller number of employees who do all of the work. And therefore, I think that is going to be a huge challenge for the smaller office. But I feel that the larger offices and the bigger international and multinational companies will be able to allow greater flexibility to their employees. We know that we work differently at home. I have friends at different friends, an architect who starts work at 7 o'clock in the morning, works till 2, completes what has to be completed, and then has the whole afternoon with his family.
Absolutely.
Perhaps that's something that particular person might like to try and keep a little bit of. It's a discussion and a debate to be had, I think.
Absolutely. So we look forward for actually a beginning between Teesside, your insights, and what's happening in India. We have a diverse range of responses right now in various offices trying to get back to work in several new, I would say, innovative forms,
Yeah.
between the digital and the occupation of space and the grouping of space. There also seems to be a tendency where open space, which was neglected until recently, is now coming into more traction, because I think occupying open space, like you mentioned with the pod, seems to be an alternative which gives a very high level of freedom, at the same time gives some sense of location which the virtual world does not easily lend itself to. And I think these kind of new in between kind of occupations between building and open space are beginning to emerge, and your presentation in a sense gave a very good insight of that trajectory from the open office, which was more an extension of the factory, the earlier open offices, and now coming into very dynamic spaces. I would now invite Dr. Jyoti Lakshmi to sum up, if there are no more questions, sum up our conversation. And thank you, Professor Leanda French, again for
That's right.
a wonderful presentation. And I look forward to much more continued kind of a dialogue and conversation between Teesside and us at Saveetha. Yeah.
That is certain. We would absolutely love that to happen too. And thank you for the opportunity to do this. But we would love to, have a continuing conversation.
Sure. Thank you. Look forward to it. Maybe we could explore a joint studio or a collaborative studio where, and present the kind of case studies we have in India here evolving in the office firmament, and then have a kind of intercultural, trans-geographical, if we can call it, conversation, which the digital space now allows us to do.
Of course it does. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all getting a bit more used to it. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. I'd invite Dr. Jyoti Lakshmi to sum up the wonderful talk.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much, sir. Good evening, Leanda ma'am. And I think it was a wonderful presentation. Because I was looking into it was a great travel for all of us into different kind of office spaces, from the playful interior spaces to the radical spaces, Microsoft Office, where we had the growing wall, and which gives a kind of inspiration to the people over there, the open office concepts and the playful office concepts, and the different kinds of integrating technologies into office spaces. And I think all these office spaces are now going to be with the current situation to be integrated into the home. So I think at the end of it, the home has to be converted into a office space, a playful space, a workspace, as well as a very interesting space for right now. So there is a gap between the initially when people used to say that work, home, place, culture. I think now everything is together at one place, and all of us should be able to break from home, break from office, break from all the other kind of stress, strain, and everything. So it's going to be a wonderful kind of experience for all of us in more creative and more innovative thought process in the design of office spaces altogether, I think. And that will be a great experience for all of us if you start sharing how actually speaking Indian office spaces are going to be changed with the spaces in UK office, and especially the small office which you are talking, ma'am. And I think it was a wonderful presentation. And
Thank you.
as our telling, we will definitely collaborate, and then we will do a combined studio, and we can exchange program. Now the distance is not the matter, now the place is not the matter, everything is like in the virtual media now also, because of this virtual media, we could connect each other in a very different at the end of different globe. So I think we have become very closer after the pandemic. I felt in that way rather than being separated and isolated. Because I think only maybe physically we are little distance from each other, but mentally I think we have become very, very closer and closer and closer. So
Yes.
the office space also will become like very, very interesting spaces, and we will be able to design wonderful spaces, and your experience and your research in the spaces will really help our students and our school also to explore more ideas and more innovations in design spaces. And I really enjoyed the presentation. I think all the students and all the faculty in our school also would have enjoyed. I really thank you, ma'am, from the Saveetha College of Architecture and Design and SIMATS group of institutions and Chennai. So please be in touch with us, and we will again collaboratively work with you ma'am, for further kind of understanding and how we are going to go about in the future. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good day to you. Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
you.
Deepak, sir. Thank
thank
you,
you, ma'am.
Dean, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. Nice.